Welcome everyone to today's case study, bringing together panelists on the topic of CK-12 for independent schools. I'm Katie, and my colleague Laramie and I will be moderating today's conversation with our guest panelists. These case studies are designed to have a more conversational feel than our core webinars. At the bottom of the Zoom window, you all should see an option to raise your hand. If you want to verbally ask a question and engage with our panelists, please press this button. We will stop occasionally for questions, and our host will send you the option to unmute yourself. Just press that button and start speaking through your computer or headphones. If you don't want to speak, no problem. As always, we'll have an active Q&A window for you to type any of your questions. If your question is for a specific person, please identify them by name when you type your question. Just a reminder that we are recording this session and we'll have it posted on our YouTube page within 24 hours. So with that, let's meet our panelists. Jason is a science teacher at Wrapup Jesuit Preparatory School in Indianapolis, Indiana. He's been working with one of our CEs, Robin, to build out a chemistry flexbook for their classes. So when we get into the introductions, he'll give you a little more background, but that's our start there. And we'll have Laramie come in and introduce Pandy.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am Laramie Spence. I work at CK-12 now, managing the math content. I also was co-director with Pandy Spence, my wife, for a small private school in Colorado for about 25 years. And Pandy and I implemented a number of CK-12 programs during that time. And we'd like to kind of share some of our experiences with you and some of the things that we learned in running that school during the time.
So I think with that, we'll have, I know that one of our panelists I don't think can turn their video on, but anyone else is welcome to do so, joining us today. And we will start with some key questions. So Laramie, I'll let you take it away.
Sounds good. So Jason, I haven't actually met you personally, but you and I have kind of tossed some things back and forth here over email. So I'm curious to learn how you used CK-12. It sounds like you implemented it in your own school this last year. If you could tell us just a little about the program in general, and then just a really quick overview of how CK-12 was implemented there, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. I was actually where all of you were at last summer. I just went through the certification last summer, and we just implemented the use of CK-12 in our honors chemistry class over this last year. And we've had such success with it that now our regular chemistry class and also all of our freshman biology classes are going to be implementing CK-12 as their primary resource in terms of content over this next coming year. So it's been a great year. We had a number of different reasons why a couple of us decided to go with CK-12. But the fact that it's completely customizable, and also the fact that we break it down into very small chunks and send it out to our students instead of just saying, read section such and such. Our students have absolutely loved the ability to go back through and look for a particular content topic instead of trying to search through a large chapter's worth of material to look for one thing. It's been a great year, and we've seen a lot of success with implementing it this year as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's great to hear. It's interesting. It sounds like both you and Pandy both had quite a bit of experience with CK-12 science. Obviously I used math. Now I moved on into that math position at CK-12 based on that experience. So I'll kind of speak to my math experience as I'm talking, but I'd like to introduce Pandy here and have her just kind of give a quick overview of the ways that she used CK-12 in the science programs at the Ciderata School.
Hi everyone. Like Laramie said, my video isn't up and running, so you're going to be hearing me through his speakers. I was the curriculum director at Desiderata, and I stumbled across CK-12 probably 7 or 8 years ago, and some of their materials were very new and loved it. At that time we could alter the flex books and was able to do that. I used the concept collections in my science classes when I was writing the curriculum for them as kind of a launching off point, because the lessons were so small and concise and specific. I was able to use those, and then from that point have everyone break off into different groups, and we had different activities planned. and things like that. But they were a really great foundational piece that introduced whatever concept I was running with on that particular day of instruction. And so, and as because Laramie told you, I'm his wife, I've watched the evolution of CK-12 and the addition of their grade books and things like that. And if I was still teaching, I would love to be able to dive into those and implement them with the other materials that I already created.
I actually honestly don't remember. Were there specific science topics that you used it for, or was it kind of clear across the breadth?
I used the high school biology. They have the full textbooks and all of those materials. I used their high school biology, and in the middle school I used the earth science materials when I was writing those two courses specifically. And then for some of the other science courses, when I would need a very specific topic, and sometimes even venturing out of science, when I needed a specific topic, I would find the concept collection from CK-12 and again use that in some of the other classes that we had in order to use, like I said, as a starting point, get everyone on the same page as to what topic we were going to be studying, and then branch off from there.
When I used CK-12 as a teacher, also, I used it mostly for algebra. I did also use it for some geometry. I really liked the fact that I didn't have to sort of tell students what part of a given lesson that they needed to focus on. I could actually customize the lessons easily and give each student sort of their own version of it. We had very small classrooms. We generally had no more than 6 to 8 students at a time for any given class. So I could actually take the time to make use of the customization options and really give each student their own version of the material. And certainly that's not something that's liable to be implementable in a large public school classroom, but I think that there are unique opportunities and challenges in an independent school like the one that we worked in. So I definitely think that there are some ways to use CK-12 there that aren't immediately obvious to someone that just sees it from a big point of view, like a 30, 40 student classroom. Jason, in your program, do you have limited classroom sizes? Do you work with students on like a classroom whiteboard type of a thing and give them assignments individually, or do they spend time actually on the things?
We're a fairly traditional kind of classroom environment, but our classroom sizes are fairly small. We range from about 18 to normally a max is about 22 to 24. So it does allow us a great deal of customization in terms of what content our students get. I do try to differentiate as much as possible and try to tailor some of those units specifically for some of my students. The ability with CK-12, the great thing is there might be some students, well, actually from our standpoint, we have students with a wide variety of middle school backgrounds. So we have some that have a great foundation in terms of coming into chemistry, and we have others that are rather lacking. So with CK-12, I'm able to go back and pull maybe some more beginning lessons or some more beginning content that I might not need to give to everybody. But with CK-12, it's extremely easy to go in and find some material that someone might be lacking in, and being able to give that or access to just that one particular student and such. Significantly easier than with normal textbooks.
Yeah, that's a great observation. In fact, it's interesting. It ties right into another question we just got. Someone was asking about how we customize one of our textbooks to work for specific students. I'm actually going to jump to a screen share here real quick, and I'll demo that just really quickly. We actually do have a number of webinars that are specifically dedicated to that sort of thing, and they're all accessible via our on-demand system. So I definitely recommend that you go take a look at those, but I'll just give you a quick overview here. I'm going to start at the CK-12 homepage right here, and it doesn't matter what book I choose. I'm just going to grab our Algebra 1 new Common Core CCSS book with the new Flexbook 2 version. I'm going to customize the book right here. I just choose that little customize option. Just like that, I have my own version of this book. I can retitle it. And I can take individual lessons that maybe I want to, to have more than one copy of. I can actually add different versions of lessons. I can drag them from other locations in CK-12. I can find maybe a different version of linear functions. Oops, liner on CK-12. L-A-N-E-A-R might come across a little better. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So linear functions here. I choose another option to add, put it into my textbook. And just like that, I've added an entire new lesson to my version of the textbook. And I can actually have one version of linear functions for one student and another version for another student and customize them in whatever way I want. Like, for instance, if I click on the edit button here, I can go into that specific version of that lesson. It'll customize it for me. Now there's linear functions for Laramie's class. And maybe this one's for Pandy. So I have this specific version of this lesson customized for my student, Pandy, and I can go in and say, the vegetation of the rainforest is very interesting, Pandy commented, and go through and just kind of add some fun little Easter eggs or directly customize content. Say maybe for Pandy, I don't want to talk about this teaching time material, so I can just delete that here. And now I have a version of this text that doesn't have that, and I can easily assign it to Pandy as a student in one of my classes. So it's very quick, it's very simple. It's one of the primary functions of CK-12's platform. Definitely something we put a lot of time into making as intuitive as possible. Okay, so I definitely appreciate you bringing that up, and I think it's neat to be able to customize that for every student. We had a student that we worked with that was, I remember, was crazy about absolutely everything golf. Had no interest in anything else. Couldn't get him interested in any kind of math, any kind of English, unless we tied it some way to golf. So we literally went through and picked examples of everything we could possibly find that were related to golf and incorporated them into his curriculum. So we'd talk about American history. We'd say, here's what was going on in American history while this golfer was winning this tournament, or while this golfer was being born, or when golf was first brought to the country. All these ways of tying his interest in with what he had. And CK-12's customizability makes that just dramatically easier, instead of just coming up with stories off the cuff or using notes and trying to tie them into a written textbook that you can't adjust.
Laramie, it looks like we just lost your audio, so.
Thank you. Sorry, I foolishly clicked mute and then started talking. That doesn't work well. I'm going to look at we have another question here came up, says, you use the same book and just tell students to look at specific parts, or make a totally different book for each student? And actually, we do either or both. Like I said, I had a very small class, so it was easy enough for me to actually customize individual lessons, as I showed you there. But I think it's certainly quite viable to just have your certain class lesson, and you can even put headers in at different sections in the lesson and say, basically, Pandy, Laramie, Jason are this part, and then just Laramie and Jason are this part. So it's easy for your students to scroll through and find the things that are applicable to them as well. But I would say that largely depends on the size of your class and how many students you're customizing for. And then we have the question, in doing these individual lessons, are students enrolled in a different class than everybody else? No, that's actually one of the really neat things about CK-12, is because you can design your class based on the students that are in it, but give individual assignments to different students in the class. So you can literally have, and again, this is one of the things that I've used, you can have an Algebra 1 class that has 5 or 6 students in it, and then of the lessons that are assigned to that class, maybe only 1 or 2 do a given lesson, and then 2 or 3 of the others do a different lesson on the same day. And you can assign those with the same due dates, but have completely different lessons for each student, and yet track them all on the same report. It's pretty nice.
So I'm gonna jump in for a second, and you can do that kind of by creating separate like CK-12 classes within here. So there are options if you're integrated with like a learning management system such as Canvas or Schoology, where you can like deselect particular students for assignments. But we do have the option to build kind of as many classes as you want within CK-12 to get those subgroups that you need to do what Laramie is clarifying.
Yeah, and I think it's I think that actually leads to one of the other questions that we were discussing earlier, and that is different ways that you might use CK-12 to adapt the things that CK-12 already offers, and then adapt those in a way that works best for you. And I actually want to send that question over to Pandy and see. I know that when we were running the school, she actually had custom-built websites for individual classes, because some of the integration technologies for CK-12 weren't there yet. Those tools are definitely in existence now. You can certainly see them in the Flexbook 2 platform. But I think some of the importance as far as why she was incorporating those things and why it was useful for students to have the links to those there are definitely viable. And I think quite useful to see how you can tie this into the Flexbook 2 platform today. Can you tell us a little about what you did with that, Pandy, and why it was important for your students?
Sure. I'm going to start the video and hope it works here. Our private school was a very hands-on program. We worked with a lot of kids with some learning difficulties, and so the more hands-on activities that we could find, it was better for our students. So, and I know now in the Flexbooks, you can actually find those links to outside sources and include them in your book. And like Larry said, at the time when I wasn't able to do that, I would build web pages, and we can download the PDFs from CK-12. I believe that's still a feature. And I would have a link to the PDF that we would read as a group, as a class, answer the questions at the end of that lesson, and then have individual links for different students. Maybe I'd find 5 different activities and say, complete 3 of the activities, and then the students could break up into groups of 2 or 3, and using those links that are now able to be embedded in the CK-12 Flexbook that you create, they could follow those links off and do individual activities.
Did you think it was necessary, as you were adapting the lessons to different students, to be able to give them different kinds of modalities and let them choose between them? Or did you usually just say, here's the 5 different activities, and everybody's going to pick 3 and we'll do those 3 as a class? Were they customized per student?
Not necessarily per student, but because of the way the program, our private school, the way it ran, the students would break off and do their own work on activities, and then I would circle through. So they would find, of the list of 5 possible activities that they could complete, they would pick their 2 or 3, and then I would be circulating through the different groups that chose those activities. And some of them were CK-12 activities. So CK-12 had the Plixes at the time that I was working with this. So some of those activities would be Plixes. There's embedded videos in some of CK-12's things. So some of the students could watch videos, and then I would watch the video ahead of time and create questions that went with that video. So a lot of different modalities and activities that they could choose from and participate in.
Cool, thanks. Jason, I'm going to forward that same question over to you, actually. How do you use the customizability of CK-12 to make kind of a multimodal approach to teaching courses at your school?
So one thing that we've decided coming into this year, with the success of using honors chemistry, using this with honors chemistry, like I said, now our beginning level or our non-honors chemistry is also being pulled into this as well. They've decided to adopt the same program that we have, and the great thing about this is we're now going through and we're creating a base level program for our regulars, our regular chemistry students, off of the honors chemistry program that we've created over this last year. And basically with that, we're able to pull out some of the more complex topics that we teach in honors chemistry that are not fit for regular chemistry. But the great thing about all of us now using the same platform, but just with some added things on the upper level, is the fact that when they leave our chemistry classroom, they may, our environmental science class, which is taught to juniors and seniors, may have both regular chemistry and honors chemistry students feeding into that program. Now that we have kind of a differentiated program with them, but we keep some of the examples some of the equation formula or formats and things like that that we use in our chemistry book. Everybody that is taking chemistry now has a good same background. So they might be coming from different chemistry classes, but they're still covering, or used to seeing common ways of things being laid out, or common ways of chemical equations being written, or that type of thing. And actually, to piggyback off of a comment or question earlier about how do we customize and that kind of thing. One of the great things that I've used this for, the customization in terms of chemistry, is sometimes when you pull up different resources, you might see a particular equation or something that's not written in the way that you would normally write it, or write it on the board, or things like that. The great thing about CK-12 is the fact that you can go in and you can edit all of those things, and you can make your book look exactly like what's on your labs, what you're talking about in class. If I draw something on the board, and as students see more and more of those things line up, I think it just adds to the credibility of the course and their ability, or their ease of being able to go from one source to another in terms of like a lab and assignment, that type of thing as well. So that's a great thing with the customization portion of it.
I like your comment about being able to customize one book so that it works for different classes. Those classes may have very different levels as far as what they're instructing, because I think you're kind of alluding to there, if you have to pick a different publisher or a very different book for one class than for the other, the material they may get, even though it's the same concept, may not actually come across the same way to the students, and it's hard to build on later. So I think that's
correct. Yes, and the other nice thing is actually some ease for collaboration between teachers as well, between the levels of chemistry as well. I mean, we all talk, but now that we're also using the same textbook more, or the same ebook, the same resources, it also adds to our ability to share ideas, and we all know that the more teachers you have looking at particular resources, the more great ideas you have as well.
Okay, I have a question just came in actually for you, Jason. They're wondering if you have an AP chemistry class for your upper level students, and are you using CK-12 for them, or are you just using it as supplemental material?
We do have AP chemistry. I am not the AP chemistry teacher. We do have AP chemistry, but no, she is not using CK-12 for AP chemistry. But one of the great things is she's one of the honors chemistry teachers as well. Actually, she went through this course with as I did last summer. The great thing about this is we have been able, over the last year and a half here, to customize what we do to get these kids prepared for AP. It's our understanding that when they take honors chemistry, that the majority of them are going to go on and take AP chemistry. So we have been able to now move content, move concepts around to fit exactly what she wants them to know going into AP chemistry. And the great thing is we can also, in terms of how she, notations or things like that, that she uses in AP chemistry, we can now bring those down to the honors level as well, so that they see all of the same content, or the same types of things before they get into that AP chemistry as well. I do not believe at this time that she's thinking about AP going to CK-12, but you never know.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. I love that they're going across different levels and being able to do the exact thing. Like you said, it's kind of the same feel, using the same ways to view things. It's easier for students to build on their existing knowledge. I think that's excellent. We had actually another comment about the value of customization in our chat window here. Where there's a Ron said that he used CK-12 at his previous school teaching geometry, and wasn't real happy with the scope and sequence they were using. but CK-12s he did like, and then discovered later that it's one of the benefits of it is being able to sort of adjust that scope and sequence on the fly instead of having to wait for a new version of a book to be published, or to just kind of tell your students, okay, now we're going from chapter 2 to chapter 12 and then back to chapter 4. It's very easy at CK-12 just to drag and drop those chapter orders and make a version of the text that specifically fits your school or your personal teaching needs. Okay, what are the questions that we had here? This one's for Pandy. What features of the new CK-12 platform do you think would have been particularly beneficial to you when you were teaching? In other words, which of those things you mentioned earlier that you had, I know we were talking about you had links in another website so that students could access that. Do you think that the related content is a big deal for the students now? Do you think if you were applying it currently, you'd use more of the adaptive practice? What kinds of things that CK-12 offers now that they didn't then, do you think kind of solve some of the issues that you were handling manually at that point?
You cheated on that one. You and I discussed earlier the adaptive practice. I think the problem with independent learning in our program was you could assign a reading assignment to a student, but then you could never really truly verify that they had read that. And with the adaptive practice and the ability to create the quizzes that go along with what you've written. So if you alter or change a textbook to meet your needs for your classroom, you can also choose and pick which questions are part of that adaptive practice. And then it records the student's responses to that. So you can see that they obviously did or did not complete the assignments as requested, based on the fact that you also get feedback from those questions, from I think even the new implementation that you have of what you are no longer calling Quizlite, but that was Quizlite, to see all of the inline questions, to see all of your students' responses to those, I think is invaluable, because then you have instant feedback on who is completing what, and that they are actually reading and learning from the material.
I will share my screen here real quick and kind of give those of you who haven't seen it before an example of those inline questions she's talking about. Now, we don't currently have a method at CK-12 to give you a report for what the students do with an inline quiz, with the inline questions the way we do custom quizzes. We are working on something similar with that so that we can help give you a more immediate idea of what students are doing with those inline questions. But let me show you a little bit of how we are using it. I'm just going to pick a random lesson here. A couple things to point out here that we have the lesson plans for teachers that you see if you're signed into CK-12 as a teacher. And then you also, as a teacher, have access to all of the other related modalities that you probably saw in our concept pages before. The difference now being that these particular 5 were specifically chosen to go with the text of this lesson, not just the concept of, in this case, properties of translations, but specifically with the material presented in this lesson. These are the modalities that CK-12 offers that are most related to that. But if you then click on Start here, again, this is one of our new Math 8 lessons. You'll see that there are these embedded interactives as part of the lesson, and then the questions that she was referring to are these right here. These are the same format as CK-12's custom quizzes that any teacher can make at any time, but now there's the option to embed these in a lesson. And we found that there's a lot of value to having, not only giving the students an interactive to play with and something that they're supposed to specifically do, but since the students have a tendency to just play with these things and not really understand necessarily what the goal behind them is, we're able to put questions below them that specifically lead them to understand the point behind why that interactive was included. And when they click on these, they get that immediate feedback that Pandy was just mentioning. So if they get it wrong, this is why that's wrong. Not just, oops, try again, but no, this is the reason this isn't correct. Now try again, and use that information to try and get the answer right on a successive attempt. So yeah, I think certainly as a teacher myself, when I was using CK-12 math, At the time, first of all, not nearly so many interactives. We used Plixes. We would find Plixes from the Plix search page, which you can definitely still access at CK-12 here. And I would go through these and find something that was specifically associated with what I was teaching, but often it was more tangentially related. Like maybe I was teaching something about slope and I'd find a Plix that dealt with slope, but not necessarily maybe I was talking specifically about negative slope or positive slope. And now those interactives that are part of the lessons in the new books are always directly related to that content instead of just sort of tangentially. So I see that as a real benefit for teachers like the teacher I was when I was doing a lot of math instruction. All right, let me stop my screen share here. Too many buttons. There we go. Okay. Looks like we have a quick question. Are the teacher plans listed for every section, concept, chapter in Flexbook 2? Yes, they are. All of the middle school books, the middle school math 8 is live. Middle school math 6 and 7 are coming very soon. In fact, the content has all been written. It's just a matter of the editing for those. But yes, all 3 of those books have specific teacher resources for every lesson. And we, in deference to the idea of customization and being able to resort a textbook as you wish, we allowed the teacher resources to be tied to the individual student resources. So if you shuffle the order of the student book, all the individual teacher resources go with them. So yes, they're definitely available. All right, we had another question early on here. How do you use CK-12's customizability and modalities to help address learning differences? And this is just kind of a general question. So I'm going to ask you, do you have any ideas on that specifically, Jason? Any ways that you at your school use CK-12's content to, to help with students that have specific learning challenges?
Sorry about that. I was dealing with a small child there for a moment, so sorry. Back now. Actually, yeah. So chemistry, portions of it being very math intensive, it's actually wonderful. I have been able to go in and pull some content from some of the math sections and that as well, to be able to supplement some of our content to give to specific students that might have an issue with one math concept over another. It's been great to be able to refer them to some of the math content straight from a website or a source that they're already used to using in terms of CK-12 there. It's also been great being able to use some of the practices and that being able to see where some students are struggling over others and being able to once again supplement some of the material that they might be lacking in. Unfortunately, I haven't had much use of like actually going in like you have in terms of making a specific unit just for a single student. But like you were saying, it would be extremely easy to do with this.
Sure. I know at our program we had kind of a high ratio of students that had somewhere on the autism spectrum or ADD, ADHD. Students that didn't do well in a large classroom often tended to gravitate to our program just because we had very small classrooms. So we had a lot of experience, sort of adapting our content to those kinds of students. And I think certainly I ran into the benefit of being able to have different modalities for different students that were studying the same material, because one student might do particularly well with a video, whereas another student might do, might understand more quickly if they were given a Plex or some other kind of interactive. So it was very nice from my standpoint to be able to choose the right modality for the right student. Did you have any observations on that, Andy?
From a student who was struggling with something standpoint, the nice thing about CK-12's concept collection was those lessons were broken down into such small chunks But it was really nice if I had someone struggling with something that wasn't necessarily part of the curriculum we were working on, to be able to go in and do a quick search for that specific topic and find material right away that addressed that, and then just be able to print out that 1 or 2 pages to share with the student. So that would be my
and as
contribution to
someone who
that.
did math, I think our lessons tended to be bigger, but certainly the science content is broken down into those much smaller concepts. So I can definitely see how that would be quite useful. All right, so Jason, what other specific tips or tricks do you think you could offer for someone who was first starting to implement CK-12 in their science classrooms? I mean, did you just literally say, okay, here's a chemistry book, grab it and use it? Did you guys do some initial shuffling of content to build one that worked for you? What did you do to actually sort of get the ball rolling and get going with that CK-12 content?
Actually, for us, we started by looking at some of the pre-made CK-12 Flex books. At the time we were looking through them, it was just the original Flex books in there. We started with that. We then also took, like I said, our AP chemistry curriculum and tried to kind of put those together into a resource that worked for us. Actually, over this last year, then we never created, or we never used a single Flexbook the entire year. We actually went in module by module and assigned each one individually, and kind of amassed a textbook then as we went throughout the year. It might be an unconventional way of doing it, but it actually worked for us. And with that, I use Google Classroom as my primary LMS, and it actually worked really, really well. I assigned each small topic as its own individual assignment to read. And the first time I did that, I thought, man, these kids are going to freak out that 13 different things are being assigned to them, even though each one's like a paragraph or such. But my kids said they really, really, really liked having it broken down into such small chunks and assigned individually. It allowed them to kind of chunk up the material and also go back and look for those small things. So we never had an actual Flex book that we had given them. We are now working on putting that together for a Flex book eventually. But we really liked being able to take the small sections, obviously still customizing them from my account and then sharing those out. That seemed to work for us really well.
What it's interesting to, like you said, kind of use that a la carte option.
Yeah.
What benefits or trade-offs do you think there are between having the flexibility of that versus having sort of the laid out scope and sequence of having a book? Do you think that?
Well, I'll be quite honest with you. Part of our reason for doing that is we just didn't have time to put the entire thing together all at one time. So we decided that was the way we were going to do it, was kind of to chunk it up, and then we ended up really liking that. The benefit, like I said, is being able to really, for me, I use kind of Google Classroom as the organizational tool for each one of the, each content, each video, each modality that I give them. I use Google Classroom as my organizational tool on that. But that's great for as you are going along and all of my students are working at the same pace on that. If by chance, though, you had a student that came in late, like came in at a semester or something like that, the ability to have that flex book that you could just give them and say, hey, this is what we've covered so far, that would be key as well. So eventually, my goal is we are putting together a new Flexbook 2.0. We're going to put that together, but I'm still on the fence as to how I'm going to be assigning that and how I'm going to be using that, whether I'm going to stick with the method that worked for me this last year or giving everybody the Flexbook as well. So I might be able to give you a better answer on that after after another year here of having an actual Flexbook. But for us, the small chunked way worked really well this last year.
That's interesting. I would say Pandy and I definitely sort of represented the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm personally terrible at having, a list of things to do and planning out way ahead of time what my curriculum's going to look like 6 months down the road. So for me, that ability to say, well, today we talk about positive stuff. So my negative slope on CK-12 and see what the next lesson would be, that kind of sort of off the cuff and dealing with things as they came up worked really well for me. Whereas Pandy definitely planned way ahead and had everything organized way out ahead so that she knew what was coming up and what she was going to need. So much so that she was able, as we mentioned, to build out the whole sort of website structure to organize that, which is very similar to the Flexbook option in Flexbook 2 now, where you can put all that content directly in one thing. Did you have any thoughts about that, Penny? Just as far as why you would benefit from having a book versus having just the individual pieces of content?
I would think I would like the book, just like you said, I like to plan out ahead and know what's coming up. But then I was changing things on the fly, like you mentioned also, when I would find a great resource or something and that I hadn't added in, and have that ability that once you create that Flexbook, it's not set in stone. You can still go in and add new things, pull things out that don't work or that are no longer applicable to what you're doing, so that you have that book from year to year to year, but still have the ability to customize it as you're working with different groups of students, or as standards come up that are being changed or things like that. Then you don't have to scrap it all. You still have your framework. You can adjust as you need to as you're working within that.
Sure.
Sorry, if I could jump in here on one clarification on the way that we use it. I do need to kind of say that we have complete one-to-one access in our school, and we have 100% of our students with internet access. So availability is not an issue for any of our students. So one great thing about having the ability to have the Flexbook would be able to be that offline reading capability as well. The ability to pull it down as a PDF, in one large chunk as well. We did have to kind of do that. We had a student that ended up with a concussion that couldn't read screens. So we did have to actually go in and pull multiple things down to be able to print it in terms of a PDF, print off and give them a hard copy. And that was pretty tedious in the way that we were doing it over this last year. If we did have that already pre-made Flexbook, that would have been a piece of cake to be able to pull down and print off and change size and all of that for them.
I think certainly CK-12, the more we go into our new Flexbook 2 platform, and the more we offer insights as far as what students are doing directly to the student to help them kind of customize their learning, and to the teacher as well to help them understand where their students are, the more we definitely encourage people to try and use the digital resources as much as possible, which I think kind of goes without saying. There are a lot of tools that just aren't available if you try and print something out. But certainly there are challenges, I think, remaining for places where you just don't have access to internet the way some schools do. But I definitely think that, fortunately for all of us, those challenges are kind of getting mitigated over time, and we're able to take advantage of these really awesome new digital tools that particularly our new books are really diving into head first. So we had another question here. I'm assuming was related primarily to Jason, but I'm going to do a really quick address to it also. The question was, did you write your quizzes in Google Classroom and then assign the adaptive practice in the Flexbook? that are thinking that quizzes seem a bit of a challenge. Actually, writing quizzes in CK-12 is really not particularly difficult. Certainly, you have sort of that drag and drop option that allows you access to specific adaptive practice questions, but then you can also very quickly customize those questions to either add feedback or to change numbers so that students won't have seen a particular version of a question before. In fact, I can do just a really quick demo of that just so that all of you can kind of see the idea. Let me snag the screen here. So I'm just going to go to, I don't know, let's try algebra. And we'll just grab a lesson, distribution and factoring, say, start the lesson. Now if I go over to the toolbar here, and I'm kind of a high level way of doing this, it does not require this kind of detail, but I want to show you how we can find specific questions. If I copy this concept code here, this tells us the content that this lesson is a part of. This particular written lesson, this read, is a part of the concept factoring, quadratics, and algebra. So if I go to my algebra, or to my library from the home page again, click on library, I can specifically create a CK-12 quiz and start with that content. So if I choose add a question set here, we'll call this just sample. Oops. If I add a question set and I put in that little code that I copied, I get all the questions that are specifically related to that content. So I'll just choose a couple of these. These are different groups of questions. There's 264 in each. Select, and then I can just click the little edit button here. It, by default, chooses 20 questions from each of the, from any concepts that I choose. I choose that little edit button here. And I can let it keep the randomly chosen 20 questions that it identified, or I can just kind of zip down through here, see a couple of questions that I particularly like, and check mark those to add those to my quiz. So very easy to, to customize a quiz for your particular students, and then assign that quiz to your class and know that those students have never seen the quiz before because you just made it. So yeah, it's not really terribly difficult. I have not personally used Google Classroom for that kind of thing. Is that something that you can address, Jason?
Yeah, we kind of used a combination of the two sources. In all honesty, one thing that that I'm still trying to figure out the best practices for would be for adaptive practices and for quiz questions in CK-12 is open-ended questions or responses where they have to type in numerical answers. I kind of struggled with trying to figure out the best way to do that from a graded standpoint there using CK-12. So I did kind of shy away from those kinds of questions just because a student puts in 15.54 instead of 15.55 and that kind of thing, and the frustration that they got with it being wrong. Well, no, it wasn't. But anyway, but we used kind of a combination of the two. I tended to use more of those open-ended questions. I used Google Classroom for those using some forms because then I could see a lot of answers all in one place at one time. But there are pluses and minuses to both sides of that, and I think it kind of depends upon what your target is. The ability to create your quizzes there in CK-12 with all of the huge amounts of questions already available to you, tried to use those as much as possible, though.
The CK-12 is always in the midst of new implementations and trying to improve our materials. One of the things that I've worked on, kind of a beta stage that's in the pipeline, is that ability to write more of an open-ended question so that you can ask a question and we have more of a discussion answer. It's not available yet, but it definitely is in the pipeline because in particular, in my case, as we're using the Common Core text, that kind of philosophy definitely indicates that a student should be able to to offer more of a sentence type or paragraph type answer to something instead of just a specific number. Well, I think I've pretty much exhausted all of the questions that I have here. Katie, is there something else that we should address?
Maybe I'll go through a couple. I know we hit kind of about 45 minutes or so. I'll go through a wrap up. If the panelists have any final thoughts or you guys have any final questions, either raise your hand, I can call on you, or add those to chat while I'm wrapping this up. And we'll do some final thoughts and go from there. So for all of you guys that are asking kind of about different types of resources we have, this overview page is super useful. It talks about textbooks, practice, all sorts of options in there. So definitely check that out. And for those of you looking, the videos are some great kind of use cases for teachers and schools using those particular resources. So that might be helpful to give you an idea. We have all of our recordings on our webinars page. The summer's recordings, we'll pick kind of one from each topic and add that to our archived webinars as the most recent version of each of those topics. So definitely check that out. For those of you guys that have been asking about, I need to take another session, where does that go? You're wrapping up the program, what's next? We will be offering live webinars this fall. So as soon as we start getting that schedule set up, we'll start posting those on that webinars page so you can join us for additional live webinars or rewatch any recording from the summer once we get them up. You guys have been doing amazing in this whole program, kind of networking with others in the chat window. We also recommend that you do this on the CEP alumni page. If you actually go to Indiana, you'll see one of Jason's colleagues on that page there, and you can connect with her, connect with that team, or talk to us and we can connect you to our panelists. But definitely check that out, network with other educators, and continue these conversations and collaboration. And then you can also do that through the Jumpstart for Educators forum. So if you go to ck12.org/forums and then click on Jumpstart for Educators, you'll get access to that, and feel free to post questions, talk to others, connect, and go from there. So I'm going to say thank you to Jason and Pandy for joining us today. Thanks, Laramie, for moderating this, and for all of you guys for coming in and asking questions. We're going to swap back over. It looks like we have one more question in the Q&A window right now, and then maybe any final thoughts from our panelists, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, it looks like we had someone that was asking if it was possible to change a wrong answer to indicate that it was correct. If a student basically says, 4.56 is really, the more correct answer, even 4.57 might have been or something. We do not have that ability yet to update in the teacher panel or to show the student code-wise, but I would definitely encourage, particularly if you're making any custom quizzes, to take advantage of the alternate answer option. When you're customizing a question, you can specifically put in there different ways for the system to accept a correct answer. So instead of just saying there's only one thing that matters, you can put in different spellings, you can put in, maybe a fraction and a decimal option, and then certainly the wording of the question makes a big difference. If you maybe you do a fill in the blank instead of a short answer, so instead of asking a student, what the value of pi is, then you can specifically put in there the value of pi is blank to the 100th to the 100th place or something. So in the text, if you use a fill in the blank, it often kind of limits what answers the students are liable to use. So there are lots of ways to kind of address that, but we do not yet have a way to change a wrong answer to be a right answer.
I'm just going to add one point to there. You do have the option to export those reports into a CSV file. So if you're kind of exporting your grades for students, then you can go in and whatever you're using as like your actual kind of grading program, you could adjust those from there.
Cool. Well, I think that's it for questions. I certainly thank everybody for asking the great questions. It gives us something to really give us a different point of view on the things that we do. And Pandy and Jason, thank you very much for for contributing today. It's kind of neat to see points of view from other people, and even from the same school I worked at, things that she did that I didn't do, and what worked for her and what didn't. So thank you again for joining in, and I hope everybody has a great day.